I want to see what we can do by throwing these things into simpler in Ableton and just kind of seeing what other sounds we can tease out of these samples. So I've just loaded it into simpler, just completely raw, and it's going to slowly fade out over time. I've got a 60-second release, which basically means once I hit this, it's going to have this this long 60-second tail. If we pull the release down, for example, we can create these sorts of one shots essentially. And then as we play around the keyboard, we can change the key because naturally that's the default state of Ableton Simpler, and also Logic's Q sampler as well works like this. And so you'll notice that as I play around, the pitch is going to change as it tracks where I'm playing the keys on the keyboard. And it's also going to change the speed. As the pitch goes up, the speed is going to follow. So if I play an octave up from C3, obviously it speeds up a little bit, which is pretty funny. Now, here's something cool that I have messed with a few times. If you drag the end point of the sample really close to the start, let's zoom in really far. We can see how this has a little bit of a cool little waveform there. And if we zoom in really far, and we just have this little section here, I'll click the snap. This basically just means that it's going to snap the beginning of the sample to a zero crossing, which basically means when the amplitude is 0 here. Basically means we're not going to get any clicks. You can hear just this little snippet. Now, listen to what happens when we turn on the loop. So it's got this really weird glitchy sound. So what we're actually doing right here is we're doing this thing called Granular Synthesis, where we're actually taking just a really, really short snippet of audio from an original sample, and we're basically treating it like it's a single cycle of a waveform, say like a sine wave or a saw wave or a square wave. And so we're turning this into the raw material of basically a synthesizer. We're treating this as an oscillator. So it's a really roundabout way of basically taking sounds from a sample and then actually using it to create something else that's musical. So let me see, first of all, if this is in tune, which is probably not. So what I'm going to do is transpose it. That sounds like it's in tune. So we have this synth sound. It's kind of organy. It's got that sort of a digital it's kind of a weird, not super analog or natural sounding thing. It's such a fun way to create new sounds because it's you're basically guaranteed to choose a grain of a sample that no one else has ever used before. Now, I want to make this poly. I want to be able to play a chord on it. So if I go down to the voices here, this is going to determine how many voices can play at the same time. In other words, how many notes it can generate at the same time. So I'll bring that up to something like 10. That's just going to be more than enough. And now I can play. So there I have the ability to play notes. And now let's mess with the envelope here. So this is the ADSR, the amplitude envelope, attack, decay, sustain, release. If anyone's not familiar, this will be a nice little crash course. So I've got a slow attack here. This gives you a little bit more of a pad sound. You know? That's pretty cool. You can slow it down even more, pitch it up. Something like that. You can get some string sounds coming out of it. What I want to do now is kind of create a really, I want to do a kind of, yeah, a liquidy sort of pad with not a lot of high end. As a matter of fact, I want to do something sort of sine wavy. Maybe I'll transpose up another octave. Yeah, so that I'm in a more usable range of the keyboard. So I'm going to shave off, I'm going to open up the filter over here, and I'm going to shave down some of those high frequencies. Nice. It's got this video gamey kind of sound to it too, which might have something to do with the digital quality of the granular synth. But it definitely has that sort of I don't know, that early Mario Super Mario 64 type sound, I guess. I also want to create a vibrato. And vibrato is basically, it's like when the pitch wavers, you know, if like a singer is holding out a note for a long time, it's like you hear them land on a pitch and then, and they kind of have this like wavering quality. That's vibrato. And that usually represents a change in the pitch, which you can modulate with an LFO very easily here in Simpler. So if I turn on the LFO here, as indicated by the yellow square, I'm going to choose a sine wave. It's usually the most natural sound. What I'm going to do is I'm going to assign it to the pitch here. So you can hear how that's slowly modulating the pitch by a small amount. If I raise up the pitch, it goes apeshit. Now, what happens if I pull up the pitch here? Or I'm sorry, if I pull up the rate of the LFO? Because now it's at 1 hertz, which means that every second it's going to go through a full cycle. It's going to go from bottom to bottom, like this wave that's going on. So like, this is what it's doing right now. Now if I make that faster, say somewhere around like 6 hertz, yeah, you get more of that natural vibrato effect. What you can also do is you can set an attack time. This is something I really love that Simpler has. This basically means that once a key is triggered, it's going to describe how long it takes for the LFO to go from 0 amplitude to full amplitude. It's just how long does it take for it to get to that full value. I find that if I set it up to somewhere around like, I don't know, like half a second to like 1.5 seconds, depending on the music, it gives me just a moment where the sample is going to be played without any vibrato, so you land on the pitch, and then the vibrato is going to begin. A great way to create a natural sounding, organic sounding synthesizer out of what is basically like a tiny snippet of, I think, a bass from the Saint Rumi sample.